So this is it. My review of an amazing, amazing, amazing week of reading. My challenge, I'll get to in a second, but first I just want to give a quick shout out to the Bad Muslim Discount, Syed and Masood, which I put on to the end of last week's reading challenge to kind of celebrate the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan. And I read before that, Their Eyes Were Watching God, to celebrate the end of Black History Month. Two excellent reads. I'm just going to talk about the Bad Muslim Discount briefly. It was a fun, fantastic read. Sometimes it was quite humorous, and other times it was quite tragic. There's something about telling a story in that way that makes it maybe a little bit more accessible. The review on the front says this is a stereoscopic three-dimensional view of contemporary Muslim America, and I think in some regards that's quite right. I felt like there are two point of view narratives, one of Anvar, who is a Pakistani American immigrant who spends part of his childhood in Pakistan and then moves to the Bay Area, to San Francisco, falls in love, and becomes a lawyer. I found that that character might be semi-autobiographical of the author himself. And then there's a female point of view protagonist whose name is Safwa, and she is Iraqi and faces a whole lot of hardship in this life. I feel like this author wrote Anvar quite a bit better than Safwa, but I still really appreciated those two different points of view. I think that was really necessary in moving the narrative along and also creating this three-dimensionality that was suggested. I think that the author utilized some stereotypes even to try to bring some context and depth around them, and then in other ways kind of forced readers outside of stereotypes. I really enjoyed this book, and I would recommend it to people who want some contemporary fiction and look at what it's like to build identity, to immigrate, to be part of a group of people that are under political persecution, etc. So for the reading challenge, I did, ended up being 6 books, female woman authors to celebrate Women's History Month. For the most part, women protagonists. And I made a extra little caveat to the challenge, which was 1-word, 2-word, up to 6-word titles. My 1-word title was Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this was my young adult pick. This followed the experience of Mary B. Addison as she is in a group home after being in juvenile detention for allegedly murdering a baby. This covers topics having to do with justice and also race. And I think what for me was most compelling was this sort of introspection of what it's like to come of age without love and compassion, right? So not just without parenting or parenting figures, but without love and compassion, and how that doesn't allow someone to build a trust network, and how that really impacts their worldview. I think I have a friend that has asked me for this book, who really likes to interrogate juvenile justice themes. So this book will go to her. The next book was Difficult Women. I cannot say enough good things about Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. It's short stories. I thought I had some trepidation that short stories just wouldn't be my jam right now. I'm finding hard to get into them. Wasn't like that at all. I was deeply invested in almost every one of these stories. I thought they did exactly what they set out to do and didn't leave me asking for more. I thought this was a fantastic way to look at a wide cross-section of women's experiences, very particularly dealing with very pertinent topics such as SA and violence, penance, violence as penance, acceptance, love, family relationships, loveless marriages, being stuck in isolated places, all issues that really resounded throughout these stories. And I thought there was a lot of perspective that isn't often looked at in many of these stories that I was so welcome. It was, let me say it like this, it was so welcoming to me when I'm thinking about making space during Women's History Month for a wide range of women's narratives, experiences, stories, and points of view. That was followed up by Elisa Valdez Rodriguez's Playing with Boys. And man, this book is classified as chick lit, and I feel a kind of way about that. I mean, this is a book that does a lot of really substantial things. And I think the first hint is that Jose Marti is the person whose quotes are on every one of the sections of the book, which are, as you might have just seen, seasons. This does for Latinidad what I believe Sayeed Massoud was trying to do for the view of contemporary Muslim Americans. This really shows the diversity within Latinidad, and by presenting various points of view, 3 main characters chapters written in those 3 points of view, 4, counting Goyo, and really looks at female relationships, female and feminism inside, female issues and feminism inside of Latina communities, making place inside of mainstream Hollywood, which is what, or mainstream movie making, which is what is happening in this book. And I thought that it's just tore down stereotypes or made you look really up close and interrogate them. And I enjoyed every part of this book. I thought this was a great read. I have another friend who I think would really enjoy this book, so I plan to give this book to a friend. And I have to say, these 2 books really are challenging me. I think it's really good that I've identified, at least for one, a friend to give them to, because I wanted to keep them. I actually wanted to keep them, and I wanted to read them at other times, especially these short stories. But I'm staying committed to unhauling and letting these go back out and be enjoyed by other people. The book for which I had the most anticipation was Where Rivers Change Directions. I had a lot of personal connection to this book, and I anticipated that it was going to be a compelling reading for me, just based on that. And I was not wrong. This book almost feels like a memoir. And in that way, it was a little harder for me to stay in, especially after reading books with multiple points of view and sort of a lot of plot twists. But the description of the place, which is Montana, the interrogation of settler colonists and indigenous peoples' issues inside of the state of Montana, and what it's like to come out in small rural towns, was very, very well done in this book, and I am so endeared to this book. I have a friend in mind that I would like to give this book to, because this is also a signed copy, which I find absolutely precious. And so I have a friend in mind. If they don't want it, then I think I have a little free library in mind that takes very good care of that library and makes sure that the books don't get, say, weather damage, etc. I just can't believe that one right after the other, it was just extraordinary reads. The last sort of specifically planned of the 5 books was The Dancing Girls of Lahore, and I thought this would be a challenge because it's a nonfiction, and I wasn't wrong. I think especially coming off of Where Rivers Change Direction, which was also sort of written like a memoir, and I think honestly is kind of like a memoir of the author. This is also written as such, although it does tell the story of a family, a mother and her daughters very specifically, along with some other sort of shorter parts of other women inside of what they call the Pleasure District in Lahore, Pakistan. I appreciated the author's introspection about what was she, this woman from England, doing inside of Pakistan, researching and living with people whose lives and whose stories she is benefiting from by way of her career and profits from the book sales, who have little means of escaping the realities in which they live, which are quite harsh. And these stories needed to be told, and I often spend a lot of time contemplating who gets to tell or who gets to benefit from stories that need to be told. And what does that look like? I really appreciated this view into this district, this view of relationships between women, of relationships between women who work in pleasure trade and their religion, and of sexuality, which was a theme, covered also by Where the Rivers Change Direction. And I feel grateful to have read this book, and would love to be able to have conversations with people around, again, those themes that I had just mentioned. Who gets to tell stories? Who gets to benefit from stories? And there were some topics that were quite problematic that I felt a little triggered by, and I think that would have been a book that, again, that I would love to have read with people and to be able to kind of discuss and talk out some things. It felt a little lonely reading a book that heavy. I finished it on Friday. Today's Saturday, and I'm mostly done with This Is How It Always Is, which is my 6-word title. And I was so grateful to get back to a storytelling style that had multiple characters. This is about a family, lots of characters, but very similar to Where Rivers Change Direction, where there's a need to move out of small, although it begins in Madison, and that's not as rural as the little town in Montana from Where Rivers Change Direction, but still, from a place where people don't feel safe being themselves, and moving to, in both of these cases, Seattle, Washington, so that there is a community of people who understand and embrace what it's like to be yourself. I appreciate this there is a really well-rounded sort of snow globe around look at family in this book that I really appreciate, and I'm not done, but I appreciate how also sort of the voices of the kids, the voices of the children, really kind of run through also as an important part of how to understand the main conundrum or the main topic of this book, which is a child who was born assigned male who then wants to be a night fairy, and then would like to change his name to Poppy, which has a background as well, and express himself as a girl, maybe become a girl, and all of the multi-dimensional process that's happening there. We don't get a very, very good look at what's happening for Poppy herself, but we do get a lot of dialogue and a lot of introspection of what it's like as a family to go through this transition that should be part of coming of age, but it isn't, because it's so stigmatized in society. And so I really appreciate this book. I'm looking forward to finishing it, and I also think I have some friends I could recommend this book to. So maybe a little less in the little free libraries and more to friends this week. But what a spectacular week of reading at just a blazing pace of a book a day. And I am excited for next week, but man, it's going to be hard to come off of this week of reading. It has just been really multidimensional in a lot of ways, from fiction to nonfiction to short story to multiple perspectives to young adult to just a lot of diversity in this week of reading. Great week of reading. Again, huge affirmation to me, to why I'm a reader and why I read and what it means as far as enrichment of my life.